I'd like to introduce the next session, which is about cancer caregivers, which there's many of you here in the room today. And we have two experts. We have Barbara Cavanaugh, that you heard about earlier, and also Suzanne Hyde. Thank you.
I want to introduce Suzanne Hyde, who has been my colleague and friend over the past 10 years and has been a part of our program. But what's really important as we start is to kind of look at a little bit of our history here.
Is a winding road, where it will take us we don't know, but we'll keep on going on and on. There's a peace I've never known. I'm not in this alone.
The song that you just heard was one I saw on TV because I watch HGTV to help me relax. And it was a song being played called The Long and Winding Road. And I thought to myself, that is really what my life and our journey has been. And for most of you, I hope it is a long road, but it is a winding road. And you heard that when you just heard Jeremy speak. There are twists and turns along the way, but all along the way, there has been incredible progress. We just put up there a little bit about Arizona Myeloma Network. I have a question. How many people have been to our Living with Myeloma conferences before? You could just raise your hands. Well, the good news always is for us, if you're here again, it means that you've been coming for a while, and we love that. If you're new, we're so happy that thanks to the additional support and visibility from MMRF that you found us, because it is so important for anyone going through a cancer diagnosis to have a pathway. Why we started our Cancer Caregivers program is really pretty simple. You saw in the earlier slides that Jack and I presented together that I came along on this journey the day I said I do to Jack, and I began my cancer caregiver journey. Frankly, I didn't use the word caregiver because Jack is a strong, independent man, and he was going to work every day. And I really didn't think of myself as a caregiver, and I also didn't really think of that as a job. I saw it as part of my life as his wife, his partner, and someone who was dedicated to making sure that he got the treatment he needed and the help he needed. And what I found when we started our myeloma conferences, we were not only educating the patient, we were educating the whole family, and that was so critical. We started out with Suzanne or myself doing a little program or presentation at our conference about what happens to the family and also the kind of journey that the patient and family took together. And one of the things that's really important is something that I learned when I went to a conference about 12 years ago that was put on by the Rosalind Carter Institute. And it talked about 4 kinds of caregivers. There are only 4 kinds of caregivers in the world. Those who have been caregivers, those who currently are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who need caregivers. And I can honestly say I've been all of the above. And unfortunately, most of us in our life, whether we're a patient or a caregiver, is that we will probably reverse roles at times. Poor Jack had to take care of me when I had my hip replacement. And the one thing he wasn't able to do is make coffee for me in the morning because he doesn't drink coffee. And I had to call a friend. I had to call a friend who literally came over in the mornings to bring me Starbucks. Okay, you got to get through the night. But being a caregiver has many different perspectives. And I want you to read the principles that guide our Cancer Caregivers program. We all share the same fears, frustrations, and emotions. And it comes out of a genuine concern and respect for the person who is receiving care. We need to take care of them so that they can also be able to help us take care of ourselves. And what we have learned is that taking care of ourselves is very important, or we become the casualty. We have common needs and concerns, and we all benefit by coming together to discuss our concerns and realize that we, the caregiver, are not alone. I think that is such an important thing. And we just heard also from Mary Jerome the exciting work that's being done of bringing different cancer together to be able to work together to not only share information and research, but that by working together, we're all able to do more. And this is why we expanded our cancer caregiver program from being done at our myeloma conference so that now it's offered to all cancers and all cancer caregivers. And as you can see, family caregivers have been a silent partner in healthcare delivery. We function as a de facto care coordinator. During care handoffs, family caregivers make important contributions to ensuring quality, safety, and adherence to the patient preferences, and their role needs to be formally recognized. It's interesting now that we're seeing more and more research and more information coming out talking about the cancer caregiver as an important, critical part of the treatment team. And I want to add, because there's some people here today who are not only patients, but have become caregivers for other patients, which has been an incredibly wonderful and important asset, because not everybody has a family member or a neighbor or a friend who can help them out. And having someone who steps into that role is just an amazing thing. What we have learned from the research is that 41% of cancer caregivers spend 41 plus hours per week in their caregiving role. 40% of cancer caregivers report emotional distress. Many cancer caregivers will experience depression, anxiety, and that can be present after the acute treatment phase. And many cancer caregivers experience insomnia. Well, what I do to help my insomnia is I watch HGTV and the Food Channel, which puts me to sleep, along with my fat cat, Tommy, who lies on top of me as I watch my programs and helps me sleep. Everyone has a way of getting through the night and the day, and I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague and friend, Suzanne.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, MMRF, as well as some of the partnering organizations that we see here today. Before I get going on the bulk of our program, I just want to see if we could all give a round of applause to all the patients here managing their diagnosis, as well as the 30% of cancer caregivers here today. Cancer survivorship's no joke, right? No joke for the person going through the treatment, and also no joke for the family and caregivers experiencing the journey with their loved ones. Reason it's no joke is we're getting more and more awareness of the impact not only the cancer survivorship has on the person going through the treatment, but also the caregiver. National Cancer Institute in 2013 actually refined the definition of cancer survivor to include that of family, friends, spouses, and caregivers. Those 34% of us out there who are cancer caregivers understand the impact as we stay up late at night trying to figure out how to pay the bills, as we become hypervigilant on our loved ones' symptoms that they experienced that day and whether it's going to mean the next trip to the hospital. So it is no joke in terms of the impact cancer has on the caregiver and the family member. What I always say is that roller coaster ride the patient experiences, sometimes the caregiver, the hills and valleys are even more drastic at times because they're having to focus on a number of issues besides just the well-being of their loved one. What we're starting to see, thanks to the research on cancer caregiving and caregiving in general, but more specifically cancer caregiving, is the cancer caregiver actually has a number of roles that they're trying to manage on a day-to-day basis with their loved one. So you see here on the screen, not only is the cancer caregiver in the middle, but they have multiple roles and they're having to divide their attention in multiple areas. And guys, in this circle, in this diagram, we're only looking at the practical aspect of the cancer caregiving role. We're not talking even about the emotional aspect, the fear that the cancer caregiver has in terms of how their loved one's going to do with treatment, whether they're ever going to be themselves again. So again, if you can imagine the medical insurance, the workplace issues that the cancer caregiver has to struggle with, the friends and family you're trying so hard not to turn away and trying to help them figure out how to help you, and it's sometimes impossible. The medical team, especially I run thanks to the cancer support community who has a table here today, I see some of my my multiple myeloma people in the audience today. And the issues just trying to manage, discussing with the medical team, placing a call, sometimes not getting a call back till the next day, not knowing if a symptom can wait until the next morning at 8 o'clock or should we go to the ER tonight. Family, the frustrations, the hurt, the gifts that can come with family presence. Some of our family members are fantastic surprises in our life when we go through a multiple myeloma diagnosis. Sometimes they're not. The caregiver role. So when our loved ones are diagnosed with cancer, and although my loved one doesn't have multiple myeloma right now, but he is a new colon cancer patient. And so very quickly I'm learning what it does feel like to be a cancer caregiver, not only from a professional basis, but a personal basis. But dealing with the household duties. Keeping track of the medications. I know some of the individuals out there managing their multiple myeloma, I've heard it in the support group. I don't know any of my numbers. My son does, right? I don't know any of my numbers. My wife does. She takes care of all that. A conduit of information between patient, family, and friends. How many of us on a daily basis get the 7th call that day getting an update from a medical appointment the day before? So commonly what we're working with is trying to help cancer caregivers better manage their time. Is there a way that you can universally give an update to all your family and friends so you're not spending unnecessary time making calls, returning calls, all that kind of stuff? A little bit more. I don't know about you, but just looking at the slide after the last two, I'm getting tired and overwhelmed. Yesterday I was in the garage. He had a good day yesterday and he wanted to clean out the garage. Well, I already had a list of things I needed to get done, but sure enough, who was out there in the garage? Because we wanted to take advantage of a good day he was having, right? So we end up lifting more. We end up doing more in our household responsibilities. Family counselor. Try not only to stay strong for our loved ones and our patient, right? So we'd end up being an informal family counselor, trying to read the emotions of our loved one, trying to cheer them up when they're down. And that's all energy we're giving to everything outside of us. And so that's why it's so important to look at cancer caregiving and the medical community to start to understand the importance that the family and the cancer caregiver has in the management of their patient's illness. This gives you an idea of why it's so important that cancer caregivers become more vocal in their needs and seek the support that they need moving forward. This is impossible for one person with two hands, correct? And what I always say in the cancer caregiving journey, and we used to do this in our small group presentations, and I know the England family will laugh, I used to have my cancer caregivers hold out a full glass of water. Even if you didn't have a glass of water, if you kept your arm like this for a long enough time, what's going to happen? We're going to get fatigued, right? The muscle gets fatigued. It starts to weigh down a little bit further. We get further to the table to rest our arm. And if you can imagine, the Cancer Caregiving Journal is that glass. And our role is that arm. And just like our muscle in our arm gets fatigued and tired, so does the cancer caregiver, folks. We can't keep up at that level for that long. And so the importance of caregiver respite and taking care of yourself and getting breaks from caregiving is crucially important to better take care and manage your loved one's illness and their needs. A lot of times my cancer caregivers, one of their cognitions or narratives I say that can really get in the way of them seeking that self-care is, I feel guilty. I feel guilty just going to a movie and just taking a break. Look at what my loved one's dealing with. And what I always say to that comment is self-care is the most selfless thing you can do for your loved one. Because when we get a break from the stress of life, even if it's just going to the park for a little bit, going to a movie and distracting ourselves from all the worries that we have, what we end up doing is putting that glass down for a minute, right? We wriggle our arm. We rest our soul. And what can happen at that point is when we need to take that glass and lift it back up, we're much able to do it. So I always just want to let you all know that. Caregiving, cancer caregiving, you need to put that glass down. If your true goal is to take care of your loved one who's going through illness, you need to find regular times to put the glass down so you have the energy to lift it back up again and take care of your loved one. So I had heard earlier when I was here, City of Hope has a presence here as well. And when I was an oncology social worker at a major health system here for 10 years about, I was in charge of doing their psychosocial distress management rollout. Try to coordinate the distress management for the people going through treatment. Okay? What does distress management mean? We know when we're angry, when we're sad, when we're depressed, when we're angry, right? So if you can think about cancer distress or distress management being the same type of thing. When our life is thrown for a loop in regards to a cancer diagnosis of our loved one or ourselves, what can happen is that throws our equilibrium off, right? It's like welcoming a whole new family member to your household. It's like welcoming a new office mate to your household, right? Think about the last time you had a guest come in for longer than 3 days. You had to kind of adapt, right? You had to kind of figure out how to make sense of this person being there, how it changed your routine. Now, that doesn't cause us much distress, but something like a cancer diagnosis does. It challenges our sense of safety and control in our lives. It challenges our sense of mortality in our lives. It challenges our sense of safety in our lives. So a cancer diagnosis, a multiple myeloma diagnosis, causes distress, folks. I would love to have anyone raise their hand if they have not experienced what we call distress in the cancer continuum. This is kind of what it looks like, right? Get a little chuckles in there. It's a funny way to describe sometimes how we feel emotionally as we take on these roles. What we are knowing, thanks again to the City of Hope research on psychosocial distress of cancer survivors, along with the idea that the National Cancer Institute actually refined the definition of cancer survivor to include that of family and friends and spouses, is we're seeing through the research that we are at risk of increased levels of distress during specific times of our cancer experience. We know what it may have felt like, or we try to not remember what it felt like to be newly diagnosed. That's a huge transition for us. When our loved one has complicated medical symptoms that require an unplanned hospitalization, that's definitely a time of distress. When we're going in every 3 months to get our blood work and all of a sudden the doctor says, oops, it's time to have a discussion about looking at another treatment option, those are times of distress. Those are times where, again, our whole sense of safety, normalization is thrown out the window. What does this mean now? Becomes more present. So what I wanted to do to highlight this list is that for you as a cancer caregiver, for you as a person going through treatment, don't be surprised during these times if you find yourself a little bit more short-tempered. If you find yourself having a little less patience with things. If you find yourself with an increased issue with insomnia, like many of us do, but it's even worse. These are all going to be normal symptoms you experience during these times. What we're looking for in terms of getting through it, though, is that you re-enter a state of equilibrium a few days afterwards, right? You kind of get thrown onto that island. You start navigating your way, figuring out what tools you need to figure out how to manage on this new island of a new news, of a cancer diagnosis or advancement of a disease, and then you get back to equilibrium. If those of you who have a cancer caregiver you're with, or those of you who are a patient, if your symptoms of distress the depression, the anxiety, all of those things last for 2 weeks or longer, that's when you need to tell your loved one, we need to get you some help, or you need to seek that help for yourself. We don't need these transition periods to cause a complete impact on functioning, because when we're angry, we're depressed, we're full of anxiety, we kind of stop functioning. And so what I always say to know when you need to seek professional help or you want to check into your physician's office or primary care physician office is when that distress is lasting 2 weeks or longer. That just tells you, that's a little bit of a hint that says you need some tools in your toolbox. What I always say when it comes to mental distress is many of us say, well, I don't want to get placed on an antidepressant. I don't want to go talk to my doctor. I just need to get through this. If I can just pull myself up by my bootstraps. We never say that when you have a broken leg. Do you ever fight a cast for that? You don't try to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and try to walk on a broken leg. So mental health and distress factors are very similar. For whatever reason, because we don't outwardly see that distress like a broken leg, we have a harder time justifying that we need some professional help for it. So I just want to make sure you're all aware, 2 weeks or longer of distress related to these types of events, go in and get some help for yourself. Seek a social worker at your local cancer center. Mayo Clinic and all the main cancer centers out there that service multiple myeloma patients have dedicated oncology social workers that can be a starting point. Have psychologists that are aware of what the impact of cancer has on an individual. So don't go it alone. There are services out there. So what I liked also about City of Hope is they had, during their research, broken up the person into 4 dimensions of being a human being. We're looking at the physical dimension of being a human being, the social dimension of being a human being, the emotional or psychological component of being a human being, and the spiritual component. So when we look at self-care, it's really important that we look at self-care strategies that can be placed in all 4 of those categories. Reason being, and I'll have someone come into my office, and they're at a high anxiety level, and they say, well, I do self-care. I run 5 miles a day. Okay. What other self-care strategies do you have? They'll usually report nothing. And so those individuals, I'll say, that's great. You're getting that kind of energy out with physical exercise, but you also need ways to take a break in the brain, do simple play, put that glass down. Socially, maybe engaging in social relationships that feed your well. So self-care encompasses all 4 dimensions of a human being. And so it's important as we support ourselves and each other that we look at that. We look at what are we doing physically for ourselves, socially, emotionally, and spiritually. So what we're looking at some ideas for enhancing your self-care toolbox is obviously physical self-care. One of the first things I say to my caregivers if they come into my private practice or someone approaches me at, let's say, the cancer support community, is, and they're struggling, when was the last time you saw your primary care doc? It's really important as caregivers that we alert our family practitioner or our primary care physician to the stress we're under. They need to be aware of it so they can also keep an eye on us if they start to see something that goes a little or veers out of the normal. Blood work even, where they can say, okay, it makes sense that this is looking like this because it's obvious maybe that they're not engaging in healthy eating or exercise. So it's really important that we're looking at physical visits to your doctor, regular exercise. With the amount of stress that a cancer caregiving journey places on an individual, that's all energy that's getting taken into our body, the stress, the anxiety, the rushing around. And so it's incredibly important that you release that physical energy through the use of exercise. Okay, getting that heart rate up, letting that kind of that anxiety and that stress go. Ensuring good sleep. When I was a novice in counseling, we always knew it was important to have good sleep. Until I started to understand the neuroplasticity and the way our brain works, it's actually during REM sleep that our brain releases increased levels of dopamine and serotonin. Dopamine and serotonin, folks, help us do some natural grief work. It also helps us with our mood and energy. And so it's really important that you're looking at good sleep hygiene. If you are struggling, please see your doctor. Try to get some help. If you're afraid of taking medications to rely on sleep, more and more physicians are finding new and innovative ways to help people with sleep. But our cancer caregivers, it's crucially important you sleep. Otherwise, we're going to have 2 patients on our hand from a medical care standpoint. And then, of course, eating nutritious foods. I had the gift of working with a fantastic oncology certified registered dietitian for 10 years. And I learned so much from attending her classes on good nutritious food and why it's so important for self-care. Those classes are out there. They're usually free of charge. It's really, really important. It can be a great source of energy. It can help with our mood, all of that. Emotional self-care. Just understand that depression and anxiety and fear are a normal occurrence, folks. And for our doctors out there, check in, make some eye contact with our cancer caregivers every once in a while in your office visits with your patients. Just make that eye contact. Kind of check in with them. The fear and the anxiety, what I always say, that's normal. And then what we tend to do is we judge ourselves harshly for it. What's wrong with me? I shouldn't be feeling this way. Look at what my loved one's doing. What I always say in that situation is not only are you suffering with your anxiety or depression or fear, but you're engaging in what I call secondary suffering, which is judging yourself harshly for it. Let go of the secondary suffering so we can actually help you with this. Okay? And maybe today leaving, if you have engaged in secondary suffering before, you can just say, let me let go of the secondary suffering. I feel this way for a reason. Peer support groups can be incredibly helpful. They can also be scary, and I understand that, but it can be a great way to normalize your feelings, validate your feelings, learn new techniques, strategies from other cancer caregivers that might be out there that have been in the game longer. So there are some fantastic tools, so don't be afraid of it. What I always say when it comes to support programs and support groups is you may need to try 1 or 2 before you find the one that fits for you. But there is going to be one that fits for you out there. Obviously, seeking professional counseling and support service is incredibly important, not only for the person going through cancer, but also the cancer caregiver. Again, this is not something that our medical field does not find important. That's why they spend the money and staff now for psychologists, for oncology social workers to be part of your care team. Many of the organizations out there, major treatment centers, have what we call body, mind, and spirit programs where they offer yoga, tai chi, meditation classes. That's the kind of support services that are out there. Next time you go in with your loved one to see their doctor for the multiple myeloma diagnosis, if you haven't already touched base with your provider's team of care specialists, ask them, is there an oncology social worker I could meet with? Are there classes for cancer caregivers that offer strategies on stress management, meditation, and relaxation? Again, guys, these are all ways that you put the glass down. Putting our glass down allows us to take care of our loved ones better. And then again, if you're having symptoms of 2 weeks or more, that would be what our DSM fancy manual says is time for you to seek some professional support. That just means that sometimes the stress has made an impact on the brain chemistry, and you might need some help for a little bit. The other thing we're starting to realize is because our cancer caregivers are such an integral part of communicating with the healthcare team, like I said before, and a couple people laughed when I said, yeah, my loved one knows my blood work. It's really important that we learn how to work collaboratively with our teammates in our medical care team, as well as family and friends and other professionals out there involved in our care. Collaborative relationships not only mean that we work directly and collaboratively with the medical team taking care of our loved one, but if you have any sort of private commercial insurance, don't be afraid to reach out to them. Many of the private insurance companies nowadays have chronic case managers that are RNs, chronic disease case managers. They can not only be a great tool for you, but also for your medical team. They can get things authorized much quicker. They know your case. Sometimes they give their personal phone number, not their personal, but direct line to the medical team managing your care, which can fast track, authorizations for PET scans and things like that. Positive reinforcement, we all need it, even our medical team does. They are constantly overwhelmed on a daily basis with the needs that they're facing with patients that they see, sometimes over 50 a day. So give them positive reinforcement. If their MA responded quickly to something, give them a stroke. It tends to make that person want to respond quickly again, right? What do we do for kids when they do something good? It's the same thing we want to do for ourselves when we're 30, 40, 50, or 60 and our loved ones. Positive reinforcement of things that we appreciate can be incredibly helpful. Understand the positions others take. A lot of times we do better when we understand the why. You don't ever plan a road trip until you kind of figure out you don't go on a road trip until you kind of plan it out, right? And so it's very important that if a doctor is talking to you and your loved one about a new form of treatment, asking the why question, so we understand, why are you changing this medication, so I understand and can be more compliant with the recommendation. Self-care toolbox. This is considered to be the social well-being. Social well-being, if any of you, I know some of this is kind of foreign language to you, but social well-being is everything that incorporates us from a social person. Work, friends, family, belonging to clubs, and things like that. So it's really important, again, when you're in that role of always having the glass out, that you put it down and you engage socially with some friends and family. If your care receiver is scared of being home alone while you go out, that's when you might want to take advantage of some friends, families, or neighbors that have offered to help. Hey, come on over, play some cards with my loved one so I can go out and do some mindless shopping. Stay connected with family and friends and loved ones. One of the things with social well-being, though, is because cancer can so dominate every minute of every day. One thing I've learned from the years of people welcoming me along on their journey is take control of those conversations when it relates to updates with family and friends and those out there. A lot of times a long-distance caregiver, someone that's not in the state, are happy to say, hey, let me put together an every other week update and send it to all the friends and family. And that way you can control the kinds of conversations you have. And every conversation doesn't have to be dominated by the recent update on the cancer journey or the multiple myeloma journey. So take advantage and control of those contacts with family and friends. Give yourselves permission to tell your family and friends what you need from them. I know this was an important story that I had. My sister was trying to get pregnant, and she had been trying for a long time and kind of getting to that next level. And I found myself wanting to avoid giving her a call. And I started to really explore for myself, why am I avoiding trying to reach out to my sister? And finally, what I realized is I didn't know what kind of support she needed. So I called her one night and I said, Rosie, I'm kind of in a pickle here. When I call you, would you like me to ask you what's going on with the desire to get pregnant? Or should I just count on you to bring it up if you need to talk about it? She so appreciated that, and we allowed ourselves to figure out what she needed and where I was comfortable. And she said, I'm so glad that you asked me because I really don't want to talk about it unless I have something to tell or an update. And so I would encourage you to think about that as you talk with your loved ones about the multiple myeloma on a daily basis and educating your family and friends, because that clarity is incredibly important. That's where I see a lot of times a social relationship breaking down because we're not willing to take a look at the elephant in the room. And then people don't know if they should call. They don't want to ruin someone's day. So just ask your loved one. Tell your family and friends what you need. Let me bring up my multiple myeloma stuff if I want to. Otherwise, if you call me, we can just talk about the baseball game or the football game or March Madness. Create an inventory of those in your life and their skills. That's the other thing that I see can help manage your social well-being. Guys, some of our family and friends will never be there emotionally for us. But if you want a good laugh, or if you want someone to take you out for a lunch, they're fantastic. So another way you can avoid disappointment and really manage and maximize on your social support system is do an inventory. What are they good at? Some people are fantastic at making a meal and helping to stick it in your freezer every week. But if you need them to take you to a doctor's appointment, they're never going to be depended on. So make an inventory of those individuals in your life, what their skills and talents are. The other thing that helps with is we get our needs met more quickly and we don't get disappointed and hurt with false expectations of what our loved ones can provide us. And these are wonderful pictures. It was funny, I do this on a professional basis all the time and with clients about self-care and taking care of ourselves. I go to get a massage the other day. Thankfully, my dad treated me and forwarded me a massage from one of the massage places. And I go in there, and she goes, "When was the last time you had a massage?" And I said, "I'm really embarrassed because I say to people to take care of themselves all the time, and I probably haven't had a massage in a year." So remember that this skill set, taking care of ourselves, is all ebb and flow. And even those who have been on the journey for a long time, or those of us who talk to you about the importance of self-care, sometimes are challenged and struggle ourselves. And that's why we need our social support systems every once in a while and our loved ones to just check in. When was the last time you took care of yourself? For the people going through multiple myeloma, when was the last time you just did some self-care for yourself? And so it's very similar needs, and that's why that refined definition of cancer survivorship is so important, because our cancer caregivers and those going through a treatment or a diagnosis of multiple myeloma, we face some of the same things, and so we can lean on each other. Don't be afraid to lean on each other. And I'm going to hand it back over to Barb.
Thanks, Suzanne. I really appreciate your sharing not only your own personal experience, but also many years of helping so many patients and families. I think a couple of things I want to comment on is that finding balance is a lot easier to say than to do. And I can tell you over 27 years, I can say that probably I haven't had as many massages as I need to. I probably have had enough wine and chocolate, but I can't say I've that many massages. But again, whatever it is that helps you make it through the day, through the night, and don't be hard on yourself, because if you look at the list, you're going to say, oh my God, I'm not doing any of that. Well, you may have other ways that you're coping with it. You also may have other resources, and that's what I'm going to remind you of. We all have to kind of find the best path for ourselves. One of the things, control what you can control, let go of the rest. It's a very important thing to keep in mind. I think that part of my own professional background as a social worker and as a business owner over the years, and now running an organization, is that sometimes I have a hard time letting go of some of the outside influences or things going on, and it's because I so much want to make it happen. I so much want to help other people, and of course always first and foremost is the love of my life, Jack Kavanaugh. But taking good care of yourself can mean different things. I'm going to reiterate that. And you see the pile of chocolate? That's usually my stress diet. I recommend it to those of you who think you have to deny yourself by eating healthy. Well, chocolate is now healthy. Hello? Yay, if you wait long enough, everything gets healthy again. And again, many of us can turn to both, our religion, our spiritual being, and so on. And I think that's very important not to forget that. And also to allow others to help us more than sometimes we feel we deserve. I do believe in laughter, and I have to say that I am grateful for the fact that I married an Irishman, because Jews have guilt, Irish drink, and we've been a great combination. So what I can say is that he's taught me so much about humor and trying to not only enjoy life, but enjoy the moment. And I don't worry so much about bills or laundry, as Jack will tell you. But I think that if we find what is important and deal with that, that's going to be a great thing. I am a cancer caregiver. I try, I do, I hope, I care. Just remember that, because that is true. We are the first responders. We deserve support, kindness, and recognition. And I really mean this. There's so many people I can thank, but most of all, I thank all of you. And I also wanted to add something to what was talked about today. That is really what has inspired me to make cancer caregiving not just for myeloma patients or colon care patients, but for all cancer patients, because we share the exact same concerns and issues. And what we also decided was, and it was kind of came out of my experience in the support groups, is that having information and education is one of the most valuable tools we can have. And very often, just going and talking about it with other people who are going through it is helpful, but sometimes is frustrating because we all are still dealing with it. And I wanted to point out that all of you have either been offered, but please be sure to take our Cancer Caregiver booklet, because our educational programs, we have almost 15 curriculum now. We've been providing this educational program at a minimum of 4 to 6 times a year. It's open to everybody and it's free. And I think that's really important. And again, the number of people who have influenced our programs are many. More recently, Mayo had their cancer conference, and Dr. Cragen spoke about the cancer caregiver. And frankly, it was the first time that I've been to a general cancer conference or even a myeloma conference where cancer caregivers were recognized as an important part, not only the team, but really so important in terms of being given the kind of support and education they need. In the booklet, we talk about our next free cancer caregiver education program. It's open to everybody, and it's on Saturday, April 28th. And I really hope that you can either register here today, we have our team here, or you can go online and register. Because when you walk out the door, I want you to know that we're still here for you, that we're here for not only people in Arizona, but our information is not only up on the website, but you're going to leave here with some wonderful tips on how to help take care of yourself and your loved one. We always like people to walk out with information, and I want to mention some very special local resources, as well as many of you know, some of the pharmaceuticals who have been involved with our programs. But I also want to recognize Hospice of the Valley for coming here to support us and be a resource. Comfort Care, which provides wonderful home health care services, can help you, give you respite when you need it. And also the Binding Site, which many of you know because they provided the free light serum screening, which has been so important for patients. Insys Company, that has many pharmaceuticals that they use to help people both with pain and nausea. And Jim Ford and the Ford Agency, who helps us with the Medicare and other insurances, so you can ask questions here today or go online and they will help you at no cost. We also were recently endorsed by AARP, and we will be working with them to get the word out throughout the state and the country, and also Medicare RX. So important to have these partners, and I want to say to all of you, we appreciate your time here today. We appreciate everybody, the patient and the families, who every day are struggling and dealing with this disease. And one of the things I say to you is, we're there for you, and you can be there for each other. And that's how we all can really make a difference. And of course, the wonderful doctors and all the people who are providing these great services. So I thank you all, and I wish you a good day.